walking upon the earth as he's described in the authentic hadith. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Brother, you had your hand up earlier, and I didn't want to let the moment, maybe the moment already passed, but the moment's passed. Please forgive me.
But I do have a question.
In Wolof, the Khawabariwa, you talk a bit much, brother. People say this about me, so I will run off at the mouth. And so forgive me for letting the moment pass, but do feel free to jump back in at any point you like. So, Islamic contributions of West Africa. You want to ask the question now, inshallah?
Yeah, I still
Please,
remember the
please,
question.
excellent. Then ask it.
Yeah. You mentioned that the Egyptian dynasties went on for like 3,000 years.
Yes.
But the historians, when I say the historians, we're talking about the Western historians,
Sure.
don't even know how long they went on.
They don't.
And the Egyptians themselves, in their hieroglyphs, in
Yes.
Karnak and other places,
Yeah.
mention that they descended from an ancient people that went back over 1 million.
Yes.
They use the number 1 million many times.
Yeah.
So the reality is the dynasties, I mean, I'm just talking about from my humble study, right?
Of course.
The dynasties went on well over 10,000 years and probably double that time.
I certainly would not exclude that possibility in any way. But when I speak in a public setting as a historian, I'll only restrict the claims that I make to what I know that I can document from sources that I've seen and carefully scrutinized, and I know from the careful, detailed, comparative, historical, linguistic reconstruction about which people and which languages descend from which, and from the archaeological remains. So I know that I can say for sure, and that I can prove that you have dynasties in the Nile Valley, black dynasties in the Nile Valley from at least 3,500 BC. That I know I can prove. And what you say is not in any way outside of the realm of possibility. And there's a difference between what I know and what I know I can prove.
Yeah, well, there have been carbon dating of stones on the inside of pyramids. When I say the pyramids, the later largest pyramids, okay?
That's right.
And they believe, according to their carbon dating, that those stones were cut over 5,000 or more years ago. So, and the thing is, the scientists today don't even know what the pyramids were built for.
No. Well, and I can tell you another thing. I mean,
I got an idea.
You can see this actually on the keynote address that I gave at the Mystic Motherland conference that we organized in Michigan. And you can find that one on YouTube. You actually find archaeological remains deep in Nubia. That have the layout they have Stonehenge-like structures that are on the layout that the pyramids of Giza will eventually follow, that go back 6,000 BC. So as people are making their way up the Nile Valley, watching the stars, the goal in Egypt always was to make what was on earth a mirror of what was in the heavens. So they took maps of the stars and laid out everything on earth to follow the maps of heaven. And you can actually see that process in stones and bones in the ground, in the archaeological record, in the way that people were burying their dead, in the way that people were arranging their structures. It goes back a long time, so we agree on that, no doubt, inshallah. So I'll just return to the point with your permission of the contributions then to our people, because we now know that if much of the Quran is taking place in that Nile Valley, and that the people that lived in the Nile Valley, including Musa alayhi salam, as we're told in authentic hadith, was somebody that looked more like people in this room than the people that identify themselves as Jews today. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm glad you went back to that point.
Sure.
That's my question. With Musa, there's reports of him marrying Qatar.
Yes. A Cushite woman. Yeah.
Yes,
It's come from the biblical
woman,
accounts.
right?
Yes,
African
that's right.
woman. And then they had 12 tribes, and then one of those Mennonites,
Yes.
that was speaking on in the Quran with those people.
Yeah, it's true that this is one of the reports. It comes from it actually comes from the Hebrew Bible. It comes from the Old Testament. And the exegetes of the Quran always point out that story comes from the tales of the Bani Israel, so it doesn't come with the same certainty as what you would find in Quran. because actually the story that's told in the Bible about that, and part of the, sort of the deficiency in that, is they actually claim that both Haruna alayhi salam and Musa's sister Maryam were upset about Moses marrying a black woman. But they also claim many negative things about Haruna in the Hebrew Bible, and we are forbidden from believing or claiming such things about a prophet of God. So those also revealed texts don't come with the protection that the Quran comes with. And that's why, now not speaking as a historian, but speaking as a Muslim, seeking the truth, when I call us to study pyramid texts and to study the book of Enoch, we always use the Quran as our Furqan in how we weigh what comes out of those other places. And the truth or the falsity of it, is judged by those criteria of the Quran, and what is in accord with the Quran we learn from, and what isn't we leave. I gave the khutbah the other day at Howard, and I was telling the people that there's actually still today a community of people called Mandaeans. They actually continue the practice of baptism as taught by John the Baptist in the time of Isa alayhi salam. So they follow the teachings of Sayyidina Yahya. It's a community that exists down to this day, and they have a book that historians have dated from the 7th century CE, the time of the Quran. That's the teachings of John the Baptist, and it comes down. And there's actually a researcher at Rutgers who's been posting translations of this book. It's an amazing book. Read it. Go online and find it, because the echoes of the Quran in it are so strong. You realize they have the authentic teachings of a prophet in this book. But it's not protected, because in order to raise the status of John, those Mandaean people deny the prophethood of Jesus. Na'udhu billah. The Quran is the book of tolerance because it affirms all of the prophets. Upon them all peace. The Jewish people denied the prophethood of Ismail for ethnic reasons. The Mandaeans knocked down Jesus to raise up John. The Bible, in many cases, knocks down John to raise up Jesus. There's very little about John, but Jesus himself is quoted in the Bible as saying, "Nothing from the wombs of women is better than John the Baptist." It's Matthew 11:11. 1:1:1:1. And Surah Maryam says, "Lam naj'al lahu min qabluhu samiyya." With respect to Yahya. Many of the exegetes say this means none before him bore this name, with Samia in that meaning. Except that the exegetes also, the ones that are educated, know that actually they say that Sayyidina Zakariya's father, or his grandfather, they're not clear which, was named Yahya. So the grandfather or great-grandfather of Sayyidina Yahya was also named Yahya. What does it mean when we say we gave none before him this name? But of course, the other way of reading Samia in that sense is none were like unto him. We made nothing like him before. And the Quran uses the same language about Allah himself in Surah Maryam, saying, "Do you know anything like unto him?" In the same surah. هَلْ تَعْلُمْ لَهُ السَّمِيَّةِ. Do you know anything like unto Allah? So nothing like unto Yahya was made before him, which is just the Quranic truthful way of saying what was said in Matthew 11:11. Nothing from the wombs of women was better than John the Baptist. And it was true until Jesus was born. And it was true of Jesus until the Prophet ﷺ was born. As prophecy was coming to a close, it was also intensifying. And it was sealed with our beloved. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So that's the other Islamic contribution of West Africa, and with this I'll move to the spiritual practices and what lessons can be learned. Devotion to the Quran is the beginning and the end, and any teacher, any sheikh, any speaker that doesn't draw you closer to the Quran and enhance your connection with the Quran is not your sheikh, is not your teacher. Whatever draws you closer to the Quran, makes the Quran beloved to you, will eventually make you beloved of the one who sent the Quran. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, and you see that in West Africa in a million ways, and I teach a 14-week class on the history of Islam in Africa where we meet for 4 hours each week. So I do this in 56 hours. I can't do it in an hour and a half. Can't tell you all the ways in which the people there are committed to Quran. But the other part that they're committed to is that they're committed to the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. They are committed to sending copious salawat al-nabi, invoking much blessing upon the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. And there are many reasons and justifications, many historical examples for this. But to make the point, perhaps, I'll just distribute a few copies of a poem written by one of those great sheikhs, the one I mentioned before, Ahmadu Bamba. You'll have to find in this bigger copy, which is also the article, you'll find the translations come later in the pages, and maybe look on with other folks. Thank you, sister. But if you can find the page where the English translation of the poem begins, I guess I'm seeing that the page numbers are actually on that page, but it's the one that corresponds to page 234. The same one that I mentioned that kissed the copy of the Quran and gave it his place anywhere. The one that wrote all those books and all those poems wrote this particular poem. And I use this in the class for instruction in my Islam and Africa class. Actually, in my Islam and Africa class, the final writing assignment in the class is that students have to make a takhmis of this poem. A takhmis is when you take a poem that has couplets and you add 3 lines of your own to the original couplets to make something 5. Takhmis means to make 5. So you take 2 and you turn it into 5. So my students have to add 3 of their own lines to each pair of lines that you find here. They have to choose 40 verses that they like. They add 60 of their own to make a 100-verse poem. That's what we do at the University of Michigan when we're when we're teaching the history of Islam in Africa. So this poem is one that Ahmadu Bamba wrote when he returned from exile. You know, and that was a miracle in and of itself, because like we said, when the white people kill you, you stay dead. So his was all but a genuine resurrection. And he was very Jesus-like in his characteristics. He was a person of absolute peace. He was all Jamal, no Jalal in him, Bamba was. He actually said in Wolof once, he said, "Every good thing in this world comes with a measure of harm except me." That's what he said. So he returned from his exile. And he said, "Take everything that I wrote before I was sent away and throw it in the sea." And people were like, "What?" He didn't mean it literally, but he explained what he meant by what he did with his pen after he returned. This was one of the first poems that he wrote after he returned, and for the rest of his life, he only wrote poems praising the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. He had written books in Islamic law, in Islamic theology, on grammar, in all of the disciplines of the religious sciences before he was sent away. He said, "Throw them all in the sea." Now, he didn't mean throw them all in the sea, but he said, what I do with my pen from here on in is worth infinitely more than what I did before. And what he did with his pen from that point on was write madih, write praise for the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he explains in the prologue to the poem why. He begins with Salatul Fatihi. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin al-Fatihi lima khulaq wal khatimi lima sabaqa nasr al-haqq bil-haqq wal hadi ila siratika al-mustaqim wa ala alihi haqqa qadri al-muqdar al-azim. Ameen. Blessings on our Lord Muhammad, the opener of what was closed, the seal of what came before, the champion of truth by truth, and the guide to your straight path, and upon his family in due measure with his eminent status. Ameen. And then he said, and make this poem a way to Iman, Islam, Ihsan, and eternal happiness. And may it gladden the messenger of God. Blessings of God Most High upon him, along with peace, wherever one might recite it, write it, or even gaze upon it forevermore. Amin ya Rabbil Alameen. And make it among those sung by the wide-eyed houris and innocent youths in the paradise promised to the pious. And make it amongst those beloved by you and by him, alayhi salatu wasalam. I used to ask my students, I gave them the poem before I had translated the prologue. And as a good teacher, I said, who is the audience of this text? Who is the audience that is conceived in this text? The writer, who is he trying to speak to with this text? And the students, it was actually one of my non-Muslim white students, he said, Professor Ware, that one's too easy. He said, God is the first audience. I said, absolutely. Who's the second? And one of the Muslim students said, the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. Why? Because the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, the earth is forbidden from consuming the flesh of the prophets. Whatever is said